tilt it, you don't burn it. Anyway, so the habitat pile is something that's a useful feature. So same thing with the shrubs. So on your property, find out what your best shrubs are. And a lot of times they're ones that say berry in the name. Chokecherry, elderberry, serviceberry. And I found, and this is going around the state, they vary tremendously where you are. Like one side of a hill to the other side of the hill, they can be totally different. So it's up to you to figure out what they are on your property. And then if you're doing a thinning project, protect them. Don't have them chew them up. Because sometimes they will actually grind up shrubs. Right? Yeah, and I was going to say the same thing about shrub step. But in general, you might actually prune some of them back if you're trying to do fire safety. That's what my place used to look like. Elderberry is a great one if they grow in your area. And there you go. Oh yeah, and when you plant stuff, take all of the necessary steps to ensure survival. Mulching, watering, all of that. Otherwise, you might be just wasting your time. And so this is some plants that we actually had installed after the fire, and they're going to be watered. So, okay, so here you go. So here's your schematic of a theoretical thinning unit, and you can apply your slops. That's weird, the S on the bottom. But you can just sort of see the idea. And note, the features are down away from the road. So we're trying to avoid questions of hazard along the road and all this kind of stuff. And so you basically are deliberately maintaining habitat complexity in the stand to mimic that, what's the word, dry forest mixed habitat condition, because you're going to be otherwise simplifying it. So I just kind of pulled this out of the air, but numbers per acre, some people will ask, well, how many? You know, right snags, 4 to 8, maybe more if you have them. Logs, the same. Openings, this is a good one. Opening, how big is an opening? Somebody said, how about the size of your house? At least a tree length across. Something that's big enough to get light in, big enough to get edge effect, but not too big. Same thing with piles. 2 per acre. And if you're doing a 5-acre thinning, you just decide ahead of time, I'm going to make 10. Where? Over there. Put them close together, put them far apart, wherever you can, and do that on purpose. And then you can burn the other ones. Patches, about the same thing as the openings, and try to break sight distance. And when you have your good shrubs, you can put them in the patches. So you could establish your patches near the good shrubs. Yeah. So these are just some ideas and how to do that. But that's the idea behind slops. And the particular of the slops is this: instead of saying maintain some diversity, you say, okay, this is how you maintain some diversity. So when you are thinking about your land, most people with small properties, wildlife is definitely one of their objectives. I find this totally interesting that when they ask people why they own land, what do you think the #1 reason people own forest land is? What's that? No, it's not wildlife. What's the main reason? Why would somebody buy 20 acres out in the Methow and move out here from Valley?
Privacy.
Privacy, exactly. To get away from people. So their #1 objective is privacy. Tied with that is wildlife and a love of nature, kind of this aesthetic. I want to take care of the place. I love the earth, which is, totally, making money off of timber is down to about #9. It's a bonus, but it's seldom a driver. If it's a driver, they're usually, it's got a very strong, almost like a tree farmer. And wildlife is lower, but most people do it for privacy. That's right. And these other things. So wildlife in general is one of the objectives, is what I was getting at there. So there's an example of a nice shrub patch and a snag and a log, and that stand right there had a lot of trees cut out of it. It was really, really dense over near Spokane. It's actually in a Spokane City Park. And they were able to do this thinning project where they chipped up scads of small wood. This was dog hair. And that's a much more diverse and richer habitat than it was, and it's probably fire resistant now. That one's a little ways out, but there's one that had been thinned, and now the shrubs and everything are coming in. So this one has had about 10 years since the thinning, and look at the shrub litter coming in. But you've got some diversity there. Those are just some examples. So I would suggest to you that when you look at your stand, you think of it as like, what could you do? Give my contact, we'll check it out and see what we could come up with. But what could you do to keep some of that habitat diversity while reducing the risk of intense fire and helping your trees grow better? Now, forest health is actually sort of a buzzword for individual tree vigor of the trees that you leave behind. I mean, that's one outcome. So there you go. What do you do? Slops, baby, huh? Yeah. Huh? I probably won't use that effect. Yeah, so yeah, the sweet spot, of course we can find the sweet spot. This guy, I find this interesting. This fellow, Phil Hess, he's a consulting forester who used to log for Boise Cascade down by Clay Island. Remember Phil? In his yard, somewhere he got the gospel of snags, and he has a friend with a little sawmill, Layer. And this guy was giving him these butt ends of defective logs. So he started taking them out there with his backhoe and sticking them in the ground. And now, about 10 years later, they're full of woodpecker cavities. And every time he sees me, he brags about all the woodpeckers on his property. And he just cracks me up that this old timber guy was like, come here, look at my woodpeckers. So there you go. So what if this happens though? And I wanted to just say a couple things about this possibility. If this happens, what do we do? Well, salvage logging is something that comes up on the table, and I just wanted to offer a few comments that I'm sure could be subject to much discussion about this, but salvage logging is a very mixed bag, and the answer is it depends. You may want to recover some of the value of your trees. If it was land that was destined for harvest, then so be it. That may be what it has to do. And, but there's things you have to be careful about. And one of them is being in a big hurry with the weather in particular. And so look at that. Think of the weeds that are going to come in on that. The soil has been scraped all around this gigantic pile. This is actually down near Brewster. So the issues with salvage logging, and correct me if I'm wrong, but they can be soil damage in particular, and these biggest trees are often gone, and so that whole ecological thing about the big wood and everything, you set it way, way back, and it's a very complex situation, and we could have a whole long discussion about that, but just it needs to be done thoughtfully and carefully if that's the case, looking towards your desired future condition for your forest. So, I use my own house as an example. We had a pine stand mixed with big bitterbrush. It burnt it all. It's going to go back to grassland. I'm going to have all this beautiful bitterbrush and little sprouts, and all my overstory is dead. So do I want to try to recreate a pine savanna with trees in it? In the meantime, probably my whole lifetime, the best I'll get is some pine saplings with grass and shrubs in there. Is that my desired future condition? Do I want to have a snag overstory with bluebirds in it? I would suggest yes. So that's something to consider. What is your desired future condition? This is down near Ellensburg, where this stand had been thinned, and when the Taylor Bridge fire ripped through there, most of the overstory survived. It did not have the heavy fuel loadings to kill everything. I find this really interesting that the small trees died, but the bigger ones didn't. And so all the way back around, the big trees, that's that one that had the lightning scar in it, and that's up off of near Brewster, big old thing. And so the biggest trees indeed are important foundational elements to it. Thinking about what you want your stand to look like, that's on our Methow wildlife area again. Nice job, kids, over there. And so there you go. The landscape is very resilient, and long-term, as we know, there's plenty of research and information telling us how things do grow back, and Dale Swedberg brought that up in abundance last week. And so, there's part of us, it's like we got significantly affected in the short term, but golly, that was like, those aspens, that was only 8 weeks after the fire, and they would have been this high but the deer had been chomping on really heavy duty. And so the landscape's quite resilient, things will come back. And it's just a really, really interesting dynamic to be interacting as a extension of this geological force. You know, so the fire comes through, and then the human activity on the land, that's what we are. We're just another disturbance agent. We can do it in lots of different ways. We have lots of different choices. And so that's what we're trying to get back to, a more resilient dry forest type, and a lot of good work. And I think it's important to recognize that this is a significant paradigm shift, literally, in regard to the way we interact with the forest in trying to restore what there once was that was generated by the fire. And that's a real different change from what we did in the past. And so it's an exciting moment in regard to human relationship with nature that we here in this dry forest ecosystem are trying to say, okay, what did nature teach us? Let's do that as best we can. So lots of wrinkles, like Dick's question about merchantable wood. There's scads of merchantable wood out there. It's just that big around instead of that big around. And these sorts of changes in the way we approach things. So, nice, right at 8 o'clock. I thought I would go about an hour. Couple questions, Julie?
Yeah, go for it.
All right, thank you. Any questions? Go ahead.
The last 3 minutes, the first time I guess I've heard the word aspen tree. What role is the aspen tree in the valley in terms of healthy forest?
Aspen is, okay, he asked, what's the role of aspen in terms of healthy forest? Aspen is a unique species that occurs in certain circumstances and has this life's history cycle of growing to full maturity and then dying, and then starting over, and then dying and starting over. So it's sort of a pulse phenomenon, because even after they get size to them, they stop coming up underneath. You have to kill a bunch of them for it to do that. And so aspen is a unique and very valuable habitat. I would suggest it would be a priority to keep it on the landscape. Jamie, can you want to say something to that?
Yeah, usually in our prescriptions, we make an effort to more around where there's aspen presence to encourage that particular habitat type, because we've lost a good portion of the aspen we had before when we had more of the open canopy. It's a really, really important habitat type for lots of species.
So aspen is emphasized on the Department of Wildlife's area, fish and wildlife. And in their thinnings, they would actually go into an aspen stand and cut the conifer out of it, which could be drying it out and competing with it. So that would be an example. So its role is very important, and I think, at least, I think for the Forest Service too, that we try to encourage aspen where it exists, and we try to restore it when we can. That's a good question. Please, Shannon.
So I have a couple. One question: the machine that you showed that does the clearing,
Yeah.
that doesn't rip up the ground and encourage weed.
It does sort of. That macerator one that goes this way.
Yeah.
It really depends how much brush there is, what it's driving over. Don't turn the lights on. I'll show you my skins here too. Is that fair?
The other
Thank you.
question I had, my neighbor, where my place is decimated, but she has a lot of aspen, and she had an old orchard that was cut down, and we were gonna burn everything when the winter came, and maybe you or Bill can answer this. About 4 years ago, the quail just disappeared, and they really have started coming back, and so she left all these huge brush piles.
We don't like those ones.
Because the quail were coming back, and now she's like, what do we do with these things?
Well,
So,
leave them there.
I don't
No,
know.
fluff them back up.
Okay, I'll tell her that.
Tell her to bring some of them and maintain half of them, or something like that.
Yeah, that's what we were kind of thinking.
Yeah. And space them out. Scott, what would be optimal
Yeah,
spacing
they're-
for a brush pile with quail?
Whatever you like.
Whatever you like. You need a place to
I
hide
don't
them.
have enough up there. I saw one quail after my fire, and I think he went down to my neighbor's house.
Actually, that's a really great example of the quail responding to the presence of cover. Now they survive a little bit better. You look at the, limiting factor for quail, probably won't be food. There'll be seeds
Well, a
all
couple
over the
years
place.
ago, there used to be tons of them, and then like 4 years ago, they just disappeared.
That's a little bit of a local mystery.
Yeah, okay, but it's not just us.
Even the Christmas bird count, the number of quail have gone to
Yeah.
hear people, it's got
And
to
now
be
they're
an
coming back,
explanation.
so, yeah, we've got bunches of them up there now.
Hard to explain that kind of a dramatic short-term change.
Yeah, there's other, yes, we don't know. Anything else? Please, Jamie, go.
I get this question a lot, just from kind of adjoining landowners. What is generally your recommendation as the DNR small landowner contingent for people that have the steeper slopes, the ground that they can't really get up to do some of these treatments, that have the overstocked, often they're north-facing slopes? What's kind of the recommendation for doing some treatment that might not run too much in?
Yes, what do you do with a really good stand on a steep slope? I would suggest you do what you can at the top and the bottom, and almost like try to buffer it so that if it did catch on fire, it wouldn't run. I don't know what else you could do without a machine. And if you so there is a problem. This is where the salve part of the thing, that John can comment to this, the salvage question of, okay, if you've got 2,000 stems per acre, and you're gonna go in there and salvage, and you take, even the medium diameter stuff and leave a few bigger trees, what do you do with all that little stuff? And when it falls over, isn't it an increased fuel risk in the future? Which it is. You hope that it rots into the ground before it catches on fire, or you have to move it. And then you get into these operational questions, a little bit like Dick was alluding to, is like, what do you do with all this stuff? And that's really almost it's a technical dilemma. Yeah. So I don't know, that would be a suggestion, because that does happen. People own nice rolling place that's been logged 3 times, then there's this draw, and it's dug fir, it's dog hair dug fir that the grouse live in the mistletoe. So anyway, yeah, I don't know. Anything else? Thank you, Julie. Thanks for having us.